Good morning, philosophers. We're going to continue with LXXVII, which is 50, 60, 77. No one is so ignorant as not to know that someday he must die. Nevertheless, when death draws near, he turns wailing and trembling, looking for a way out. Wouldn't you think a man a prize fool, if he burst into tears because he didn't live 1,000 years ago? A man is as much a fool for shedding tears because he isn't going to be alive 1,000 years from now. There's no difference between the one and the other. You didn't exist and you won't exist. You've no concern with either period. This is the moment you've been pitched into. Supposing you were to make it longer, how long would you make it? What's the point of tears? What's the point of prayers? You're only wasting your breath. Quote, so give up hoping that your prayers can bring some change in the decision of the gods. End quote. Those decisions are fixed and permanent, part of the mighty and eternal train of destiny. You will go the way that all things go. What is strange about that? This is the law to which you were born. It was the lot of your father, your mother, your ancestors, and all of who came before you, as it will be of all who came after you. There is no means of altering the irresistible succession of events which carries all things along in its binding grip. Think of the multitudes of people doomed to die that will be following you, that will be keeping you company. I imagine you'd be braver about it if thousands upon thousands were dying with you. The fact is that men, as well as other creatures, are breathing their last in one way or another in just such numbers at the very instant when you're unable to make your mind up about death. You weren't thinking, surely, that you wouldn't yourself one day arrive at the destination towards which you've been heading from the beginning. Every journey has its end. Here, I imagine you'll be expecting me to tell you the stories of examples set by heroic men. Well, I'll tell you about ones which children have set. History relates the story of the famous Spartan, a mere boy who, when he was taken prisoner, kept shouting in his native Doric, quote, I shall not be a slave. He was as good as his word. The first time he was ordered to perform a slave's task, some humiliating household job, his actual orders were to fetch a disgusting chamber pot. He dashed his head against a wall and cracked his skull open. Freedom is as near as that. Is anyone really still a slave? Would you not rather your own son died like that than lived by reason of spinelessness to an advanced age? Why be perturbed then about death, when even a child can meet it bravely? Suppose you refuse to follow him, you will just be dragged after him. Assume the authority which at present lies with others. Surely you can adopt the spirited attitude of that boy, and say, no slave am I. At present, you unhappy creature, slave you are. Slave to your fellow men, slave to circumstances, and slave to life. For life itself is slavery if the courage to die be absent. Have you anything that might induce you to wait? You have exhausted the very pleasures that make you hesitate and hold you back. Not one of them has any novelty for you. Not one of them now fails to bore you out of sheer excess. You know that wine or honey wines taste alike. It makes no difference whether 100 or 1,000 flagons go through your bladder. All you are is a strainer. You are perfectly familiar with the taste of oysters or mullet. Your luxurious way of life has kept back not a single fresh experience for you to try in coming years. And yet these are things from which you are reluctant to be torn away. What else is there which you would be sorry to be deprived of? Friends? Do you know how to be a friend? Your country? Do you really value her so highly that you would put off your dinner for her? The sunlight? If you could, you would put out that light, for what have you ever done that deserved a place in it? Confess it. It is no attachment to the world of politics or business, or even the world of nature, that makes you put off dying. The delicatessens in which there is nothing you have left untried are what you are reluctant to leave. You are scared of death, but how magnificently heedless of it you are while you are dealing with a dish of choice mushrooms. You want to live, but do you know how to live? You are scared of dying, and tell me, Is the kind of life you lead really any different from being dead? Caligula was once passing a column of captives on the Latin road when one of them, with a hoary old beard reaching down his breast, begged to be put to death. "So," replied Caligula, "you are alive, then, as you are." That is the answer to give to people whom death would actually come as a release. You are scared of dying? So you are alive, then, as you are. Someone, though, will say, "But I want to live, because of all the worthy activities I'm engaged in. I'm performing life's duties conscientiously and energetically, and I'm reluctant to leave them undone." Come now, surely you know that dying is also one of life's duties. You're leaving no duty undone, for there's no fixed number of duties laid down which you're supposed to complete. Every life, without exception, is a short one. Looked at in relation to the universe, even the lives of Nestor and Satya were short. In Satya, who ordered that her epitaph should record that she had lived to the age of 99, you have an example of someone actually boasting of a prolonged old age. Had it so happened that she had lasted out the 100th year, everybody surely would have found her quite insufferable. As it is with play, so it is with life. What matters is not how long the acting lasts, but how good it is. It is not important at what point you stop. Stop wherever you will. Only make sure that you round it off with a good ending. A little mind blown by the story of the slave boy. Let me read that part again. Well, I'll tell you about ones which children have set. History relates the story of the famous Spartan, a mere boy who, when he was taken prisoner, kept shouting in his native Doric, "I shall not be a slave." He was as good as his word. The first time he was ordered to perform a slave's task, some humiliating household job, his actual orders were to fetch a disgusting chamber pot. He dashed his head against a wall and cracked his skull open. Freedom is as near as that. Is anyone really still a slave? Would you not rather your own son died like that, than lived by reason of spinelessness to an advanced old age? Why be perturbed then about death, when even a child can meet it bravely? Definitely stuff to think about, right? Letter 78. I am all the more sorry to hear of the trouble you are having with constant catarrh. Catarrh. Catarrh? And the spells of feverishness which go with it when it becomes protracted to the point of being chronic. Because this kind of ill health is something I have experienced myself. In its early stages, I refused to let it bother me, being still young enough then to adopt a defiant attitude to sickness and put up with hardships. But eventually I succumbed to it altogether. Reduced to a state of complete emaciation, I had arrived at a point where the catarrhal discharges were virtually carrying me away with them altogether. On many an occasion I felt an urge to cut my life short there and then, and was only held back by the thought of my father, who had been the kindest of fathers to me, and was then in his old age. Oh, I think he's talking about asthma. His asthma. Could be wrong. Having in mind not how bravely I was capable of dying, but how far from bravely he was capable of bearing the loss. I commanded myself to live. There are times when even to live is an act of bravery. Let me tell you the things that provided me with consolation in those days, telling you to begin with that the thoughts which brought me this peace of mind had all the effect of medical treatment. Comforting thoughts, provided they are not of a discreditable kind, contribute to a person's cure. Anything which raises his spirits benefits him physically as well. It was my Stoic studies that really saved me. For the fact that I was able to leave my bed and was restored to health, I give credit to philosophy. I owe her, and it is the least of my obligations to her, my life. But my friends also made a considerable contribution to my return to health. I found a great deal of relief in their cheering remarks, in the hours they spent at my bedside, and in their conversations with me. There is nothing, my good Lucilius, quite like the devotion of one's friends for supporting one in illness and restoring one to health, or for dispelling one's anticipation and dread of death. I even came to feel that I could not really die when these were the people I would leave surviving me. Or perhaps I should say I came to think I would continue to live because of them, if not among them. For it seemed to me that in death I would not be passing away, but passing on my spirit to them. These things gave me the willingness to help my own recovery and to endure all the pain. It is quite pathetic, after all, if one has put the will to die behind one, to be without the will to live. There, then, are your remedies. The doctor will be telling you how much walking you should do, how much exercise you should take. He will be telling you not to overdo the inactivity, as is the tendency with invalids, and recommending reading aloud to exercise the breathing, its passages and reservoir being the areas affected. He will recommend that you take a trip by sea and derive some stimulation for the internal organs from the gentle motion of the boat. He will prescribe a diet for you, and tell you when to make use of wine as a restorative, and when to give it up in case it starts you coughing or aggravates your cough. My own advice to you, and not only in the present illness, but in your whole life as well, is this. Refuse to let the thought of death bother you. Nothing is grim when we have escaped that fear. There are 3 upsetting things about any illness: the fear of dying, the physical suffering, and the interruption of our pleasures. I have said enough about the first, but will just say this, that the fear is due to the facts of nature, not of illness. Illness has actually given many people a new lease of life. The experience of being near to death has been their preservation. You will die not because you are sick, but because you are alive. That end still awaits you when you've been cured. In getting well again, you may be escaping some ill health, but not death. Now, let us go back and deal with the disadvantage which really does belong to illness, the fact that it involves considerable physical torments. These are made bearable by their intermittency, for when pain is at its most severe, the very intensity finds means of ending it. Nobody can be in acute pain and feel it for long. Nature, in her unlimited kindness to us, has so arranged things as to make pain either bearable or brief. The severest pains have their seat in the most attenuated parts of the body. Any area of slight dimensions, like a tendon or a joint, causes excruciating agony when trouble arises within its small confines. But these parts of our anatomy go numb very quickly, the pain itself giving rise to a loss of all sensation of pain, either because the life force is impaired by being held up in its natural circulation and so loses its active power, the power which enables it to give us warning of pain, or because the diseased secretions, no longer able to drain away, become self-obliterated and deprive the areas they have congested of sensation. Thus, gout in the feet or the hands, or any pain in the vertebrae or tendons, has intermittent lulls when it has dulled the area it is torturing. These are all cases in which the distress is caused by the initial twinges, and the violence of the pain disappears as time goes on, the suffering ending in a state of insensibility. The reason why pain in an eye, an ear, or a tooth is exceptionally severe is the fact that it develops in a limited area, and indeed this applies just as much to pains in the head. Nevertheless, if its intensity goes beyond a certain point, it is turned into a state of dazed stupefaction. So there is the comforting thing about extremities of pain. If you feel it too much, you are bound to stop feeling it. What in fact makes people who are morally unenlightened upset by the experience of physical distress is their failure to acquire the habit of contentment with the spirit. They have instead been preoccupied by the body. That is why a man of noble and enlightened character separates body from spirit and has just as much to do with the former, the frail and complaining part of our nature, as is necessary and no more, and a lot to do with the better, the divine element. But it is hard having, but it's hard, quote, but it's hard having to do without pleasures we're used to, having to give up food and go thirsty as well as hungry. Tiresome it is in the first stages of abstinence. Later, as the organs of appetite decline in strength with exhaustion, the cravings die down. Thereafter, the stomach becomes fussy, unable to stand things it could never have enough of before. The desires themselves die away, and there is nothing harsh about having to do without things for which you have ceased to have any craving. We'll leave that there. Terrible medical advice in general, but okay. Ooh, what's today? Today is Father's Day. I have created 3 humans. That is what I'm going to be thinking on today. I'm going to be trying to spend time with them to do, like special time with them today as well. I've parented the wrong way, and I've parented the right way. I've parented without principles and with force, and I've parented peacefully and with principles and self-ownership. There is a stark difference between the relationships I have with the child I parented one way and the children I'm parenting the other way. I guess the thing I'm going to think on today is to make sure that I'm creating in my home a caricature of the world in general as I want it to be. And I've talked about this before, so I won't go into it in too much depth, but if I want the world to respect people's self-ownership and property, and to think rationally, and to not be ruled by emotions, and to not have people that beg to be ruled, then my home has to match that. My home has to respect self-ownership and property, and I have to not allow myself to be a ruler in this home to the greatest extent I possibly can. Why? Because we all accept the reality with which we're presented. And when my kids grow up in an existence where there isn't a ruler, where their self-ownership and property is respected, where we're not ruled by our emotions, but we negotiate through problems, we make deals when we want things from each other, then when they get out in the real world, that will be their expectations. That will be normal. That will be what they expect and attempt to create. In the same way that everyone else parented forcefully with rulers, with public school systems teaching them that they're to stand in line and follow orders and be punished by authority figures when they step out of line, that they should be held in those public schools non-consensually as if they're not self-owners but are mere slaves of their parents or the teachers or the school systems. Those people, when they hit adulthood, they have a different set of expectations. They want to see somebody still in that parental position over them, supposedly protecting them, guiding them, punishing them, controlling them. They want all those things. That's what I'm thinking about today. I think about that often. All right, guys. Have a great day. Happy Father's Day.